Well, I'm back for another Three Illusions video. My name's Cameron Riley, and yes, it's very early in the morning and I haven't had coffee, and that explains why my hair looks this way. Well, not the coffee, just that it's early in the morning. James Bryden on the Facebook group asked me to talk about confirmation bias, cognitive dissonance, and motivated reasoning when it comes to disbelief about the evidence that our brains/minds/bodies follow the laws of physics. Yeah, good question, James. Look, I'm no expert in confirmation bias or cognitive dissonance, but obviously over the years I've talked to people about the fact that they have no free will and that their bodies are made of atoms that obey the laws of physics. And, you know, it's interesting. I always, not always, but most of the time, I'll lead people through the theory, the thinking, and they will agree. So, for example, I'll say, well, decisions, when we talk about free will, I'll say decisions are thoughts. Do you agree that decisions are thoughts? They happen in your mind. They're a form of thought that leads to an action. People will tend to... It's funny, actually, people need to think about that for a while for some reason. I often find that people have to stop and ponder that for a bit, but then they typically agree, yes, decisions are thoughts. Would you agree that thoughts are properties of the brain? Most people agree with that. Some don't. Some say, you know, they talk about the soul or something like that. But most people, 99% of people will say, yes, thoughts are properties of the brain. The brain is made of chemicals. Yes, chemicals obey the laws of chemistry. Okay, so therefore, I will conclude, decisions obey the laws of chemistry, of cause and effect. People always get to that point where they go, okay, well, I agree with everything you say and I agree that it all makes sense, but I still feel like I have some sort of control. The classic is people say, well, I don't have control over my thoughts, but I can choose which thought I want. I can't even formulate that into something that sounds reasonable, but that's what I hear a lot. Because the other example I've often used with people is, okay, well, if you can control your thoughts, don't have one for the next 60 seconds. And people will realize that they can't. So people will tend to agree, okay, well, I may not be able to control my thoughts, they just appear spontaneously, but I can choose my decision. And then I have to go into the process of explaining that choosing is a choice, is a decision. How did you create that thought? Did you decide, I'm going to create the choice thought that chooses the thought that leads to the decision, or did it appear by itself, if you follow me? And they get stuck. They get stuck in this thing. They can't accept what their own brain is telling them makes sense, that they have no control over their thoughts or their decisions. They're stuck. So this is cognitive dissonance. I don't know about confirmation bias. I mean, confirmation bias is obviously finding the answers that you want in information that's going to support your pre-existing theories. But because there's no evidence to support free will that I'm aware of. But certainly cognitive dissonance, they just can't think through this barrier. And, you know, I think it has a lot to do with the strength of our self-concepts, this idea that we have about ourselves, and giving up a belief in free will for a lot of people is a challenge to who they think they are fundamentally. It's a bit like, you know, a Christian being told that, you know, Jesus wasn't an historical character. I've done lots of podcasts and research over the years with biblical historians, and it's quite apparent that there's no evidence that Jesus even existed. No historical, credible evidence. I mean, you can't really point to the canonical Gospels and say that they're evidence, particularly as we don't know who wrote them, and whoever did write them couldn't have been and didn't even claim to be eyewitnesses. So anyway, I mean, it is a very, very, very strong case to say that Jesus of Nazareth, Yeshua ben Joseph, didn't even exist. But for most Christians, that's absolutely inconceivable, because to even consider that would undo everything that they believe about themselves and their identity. So it's the same with free will for everybody else. Very, very, very difficult, it seems, for people to break through that, even though they can understand the argument and it makes sense and they will agree. They get to a point where they just go, well, there must be something there. Quantum physics is my favorite one. Well, it's quantum randomness. Which seems to be, the get out of jail free card for people. I even had a psychiatrist in Melbourne that I saw because of relationship issues. He was like a marriage counsellor, therapist guy, 10 years ago, and he tried to argue with me about free will, and he said, well, there's quantum events happening in the brain that are non-linear, and they give us free will. And I said, but hold on, if they are random, then we're not in control of them, right? So we can't say that we have free will if we're not in control of these things. And besides, can you explain to me how you create quantum events in your brain consciously, like deliberately? If you can't explain to me how you manufacture a quantum event in your brain that leads to a decision, then you can't claim to be in control of it. And if you're not in control of it, you don't have free will, right? That's basically the premise. And he got quite cross with me. He said, I can't condense everything that I know into a pithy little statement that will satisfy you, something. And I was, okay, drop it then. Don't worry about it. So anyway, yeah, but it is fascinating to me that people can see the logic but just can't make that next step. And I consider myself lucky that when I met Bob Adamson when I was 18, 19, something like that, and he first started talking to me about free will, that I think I was young enough that it was able to get through. I was young enough and hadn't really developed a very strong sense of identity at that stage. And so, yeah, I didn't have a lot to defend, I guess. Well, anyway, that's 9 minutes, and I've just been rambling. Thanks for listening. Any more questions, jump into Facebook, jump into the comments on YouTube if you're watching this there, email me, tweet me, Cameron Riley, you can find me, and ask questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. Keep up the search.